While he was cutting a bunch of nuts, he slipped and fell from the tree. Oluchi ran to him, but it was too late. Nedu had died. Once upon a time, in a small village called Ugwani in the eastern part of Nigeria, there was a young woman named Oluchi. She was an orphan because her parents had died and left her all alone. Oluchi had a kind and loving husband named Nedu. Even though Nedu's parents didn't want him to marry Oluchi because she was from a poor background, Nedu still married her. They had two beautiful children, Afam and Ada. Their family was happy, and Oluchi was thankful for Nedu's love and support. But one day, something bad happened. Nedu was walking up on a tall palm nut tree, trying to harvest nuts for their family. While he was cutting a bunch of nuts, he slipped and fell from the tree. Oluchi ran to him, but it was too late. Nedu had died. Oluchi was very sad and couldn't believe that her loving husband was gone. Now, she had to take care of Afam and Ada all by herself. Life became very hard for them. Oluchi's in-laws, who never liked her, saw this as a chance to make things worse for her. Chief Okoro, her father-in-law, started telling people that Oluchi had used witchcraft to cause Nedu's accident. He was angry and said he would punish her. Even Oma, her mother-in-law, joined in and made life difficult for Oluchi and her children. They would say mean things and make them feel unwelcome. As time went on, Oluchi found it harder to provide food and a safe place for her children to sleep. She went from house to house asking for help, but people turned her away. Some were even mean to her and her children. One night, things got even worse. Oluchi's in-laws decided they didn't want her and the children living in their family home anymore. They threw them out, leaving them to take care of themselves. It was a scary and sad time for Oluchi and her children. They didn't know where to go or what to do. As they wandered the streets of Ugwani, Oluchi held tightly to her children, Afam and Ada. Their eyes were filled with fear and uncertainty. They had nowhere to go and no one to help them. Oluchi tried to be strong, but inside, she was very sad and worried. Every house they went to for help shut the door in their faces. The villagers, influenced by Chief Okoro and Oma's cruel words, believed the lies and turned their backs on Oluchi and her children. It felt like a dark cloud was following them everywhere they went. One night, when hope seemed lost, a kind woman named Mrs. Ofo saw Oluchi and her children huddled together in the cold. Mrs. Ofo felt sorry for them and invited them into her small home. She gave them warm food and a place to sleep, hoping to give them some peace. But their peace did not last long. Chief Okoro and Oma found out where Oluchi and her children were staying. They went to Mrs. Ofo's house, accusing her of helping a witch. They threatened to bring bad luck to Mrs. Ofo and her family if she continued to help Oluchi. Scared by the threats, Mrs. Ofo tearfully asked Oluchi and her children to leave. Oluchi's heart broke as she saw the sadness on her children's faces. They had hoped for a safe place, only to have it taken away again. Back on the cold street, Oluchi hugged her children close, trying to keep them safe from the harsh reality. They were hungry and tired. They found a quiet corner to rest for the night, their tears mixing with the cold rain. Days turned into weeks, and Oluchi's struggles became harder. The villagers' minds were poisoned by her in-laws' lies. They accused her of stealing and even said she had caused her own children. The once friendly faces in the village now turned away in fear and suspicion whenever Oluchi and her children came near. Hope began to fade from Oluchi's heart. She felt trapped in a nightmare with no escape. The joy that once filled her children's faces was replaced by constant worry and sadness. Afam, who used to run around with lots of energy, now stayed close to his mother, his eyes wide with fear. Ada, who loved to sing and dance, now barely spoke and moved slowly, which broke Oluchi's heart. But through it all, Oluchi was determined to protect her children and give them a better life. She knew she had to be strong for them, even when her own strength was fading. As the days passed, Afam grew weaker. His lively eyes became dull, and his laughter turned into quiet moans of pain. Oluchi could feel her son slipping away, and it broke her heart. Afam was sick because of hunger and lack of proper care. Oluchi tried everything she could to find food and medicine for him. She knocked on doors, begged in the market, and even searched the forest for roots and fruits. But each time, she faced rejection or disappointment. The lies from her in-laws, Chief Okoro and Oma, haunted her every step. They had spread terrible stories about her, and the villagers believed them. No one wanted to help Oluchi and her children. One night, as Afam's cries grew weaker, Oluchi held him close, tears streaming down her face. Ada clung to her mother, pleading for her brother's life. "Mother, please save my brother," Ada begged, her voice trembling with fear and sadness. Oluchi hugged Ada tightly, trying to find strength in her embrace. She felt alone and helpless, abandoned by everyone except her children. She thought of her husband, Nedu, who had passed away, leaving them to fend for themselves. She wondered if he knew what his family was doing to her, if he could see their suffering. But Oluchi knew she couldn't rely on anyone else to save her children. She had to find a way herself, no matter how hopeless it seemed. That night, as the cold wind blew through their makeshift shelter, Oluchi made a silent promise to Afam. She promised him that she would not give up, that she would find a way to save him and Ada. She held on to that promise like a lifeline, hoping against all odds that she could keep it. Oluchi held her son Afam's lifeless body close, her heart breaking into million pieces. She rocked him gently, tears streaming down her face, while Ada cried on her shoulder, begging her mother to save her brother. As the night wore on, Afam's cries grew weaker, his body trembling with each faint breath. Oluchi's mind raced with fear and desperation, desperately seeking for a solution. But despite her efforts, it was too late. Afam took his last breath with a soft gasp, leaving Oluchi clutching his lifeless form. Oluchi's world shattered. She couldn't believe her beloved son was gone. Her wails of grief echoed through the desolate streets, mixing with Ada's heartbreaking screams of pain and sorrow. Word of Afam's death spread quickly through the village. Chief Okoro and Oma, Oluchi's in-laws, heard the news. Instead of offering comfort, they saw it as another opportunity to torment Oluchi. They arrived at the unfinished building where Oluchi and Ada were staying, their faces twisted with malice. "You've done it again, Oluchi," Chief Okoro spat with contempt. "First your husband, now your son. You are a curse to our family." Oma's eyes burned with hatred as she added, "You've proven yourself to be a wicked mother, Oluchi. You've killed your own son." Oluchi felt their accusation cut deep into her already shattered heart. For a moment, her grief and pain were overshadowed by their cruelty. But deep within her, a fierce determination began to rise. She couldn't let their venom consume her. I did not kill my son. Oluchi's voice rang out through the night, filled with defiance. Your cruelty and hatred are what killed him. You've taken away his chance at life, and now he is gone. Chief Okoro and Oma were momentarily stunned by Oluchi's boldness. They exchanged looks of surprise and shame, realizing the weight of their words and actions. With their heads bowed in shame, they left the place, their tongues silenced for the moment. As days turned into weeks, Oluchi found herself shunned by the villagers. They whispered and avoided her, believing the lies spread by Chief Okoro and Oma, his wife. Her name became a curse, and her heart ached with loneliness and despair. Only Ada's presence brought her some comfort. But even her daughter's innocent love couldn't ease the deep pain within Oluchi's heart. One day, as they sat together in their small shack, Ada holding her mother's hand tightly, Oluchi knew she had to find a way to clear her name and prove her innocence. But the challenge seemed overwhelming against the power and influence of Chief Okoro and Oma. Yet, a fire ignited within Oluchi, a determination to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for her children and the truth. She vowed silently to herself that she would not let the injustice prevail, no matter the obstacle ahead. As time passed, Oluchi and Ada had been staying in an unfinished building since they had nowhere else to go. The walls were bare, and there was no roof to keep out the rain, but it was better than nothing. Oluchi tried to make it a home for her daughter, doing her best to keep her safe and warm. One day, as they were sitting together, the owner of the unfinished building came. His name was Mr. Ade. He looked angry and very impatient. When he saw Oluchi and Ada, his face hardened even more. You cannot stay here, Mr. Ade said firmly. This is my property, and I need to finish this building. You have to leave, madam. Oluchi's heart sank. Please, sir, she begged. We have nowhere else to go. Just give us a little time, just a little more time. Please, sir. But Mr. Ade shook his head. I am sorry. You must go, madam. I can't let you have here. With a heavy heart, Oluchi gathered their few belongings. Ada held her mother's hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. They had no choice but to leave. As they walked away, Oluchi felt more lost and desperate than ever. Days turned into weeks, and life grew even harder for Oluchi and Ada. One morning, as they were trying to find a place to rest, two men approached them. They were messengers from Chief Okoro, her father-in-law. Oluchi, one of the men, said, Chief Okoro has summoned you before the chief council. You must come with us. Oluchi's heart pounded with fear. She knew this was not going to be good. Holding Ada close, she followed the men to the village square, where the chief council met. When they arrived, Chief Okoro was already there, his face twisted with anger. The other elders of the village sat in a circle, looking serious and stern. The villagers gathered around, curious to see what would happen. Oluchi, Chief Okoro began loudly. You are here because you have committed a terrible crime. You have killed my son, Nedu, and now my grandson, Afam. You are a curse to our family. Oluchi felt her knees go weak, but she stood tall, holding Ada's hand tightly. I did not kill them, she said, her voice steady. Nedu's death was an accident, and Afam died because we had no food or shelter. It was not my fault. Chief Okoro's eyes blazed with fury. Lies, he shouted. You are a wicked woman, and you must be punished. The chief council listened carefully. One of the elders, Elder Obi, spoke up. We need to hear both sides, he said. Oluchi, tell us your story. With tears in her eyes, Oluchi told them everything. She spoke about Nedu's accident, how she tried to care for her children after his death, and how Chief Okoro and Oma, her mother-in-law, had made their lives miserable. She explained how they had been thrown out, shunned by the village, and now Afam had died because of their hardship. The villagers listened in silence. Some of them began to see the pain in Oluchi's eyes and the truth in her words. But Chief Okoro was not done. She is lying to save herself. He insisted she must be punished for her crimes. Maazi Obi and the other council members exchanged glances. They knew they had a difficult decision to make. The truth was not clear, and they needed time to think. Oluchi, Maazi Obi said finally, we will consider your words and the accusation against you. You may go for now, but we will call you back when we had made our decisions. With that, Oluchi and Ada were allowed to leave, but the weight of the accusations hung heavily over them. They had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. As they walked away from the village square, Oluchi felt lost and confused than ever. Oluchi and Ada walked aimlessly through the village, their hearts heavy with worry and fear. The villagers' whispers follows them everywhere, and the accusations from Chief Okoro weighed heavily on Oluchi's mind. They had nowhere to go, and Oluchi knew she had to find shelter soon. As they walked, Oluchi remembered her father's old thatch hut on the outskirts of the village. As her parents passed away and she got married, the house had been abandoned. The thatch was worn out and the walls were crumbling, but it was the only place they could go to avoid further embarrassment and find some peace. Come, Ada, Oluchi said gently, taking her daughter's hands. We will go to your grandfather's old hut. It's not much, but it will give us a roof over our heads. Ada nodded, trusting her mother completely. They made their way to the hut, walking through overgrown paths and fields. When they finally arrived, Oluchi's heart sank. The hut was in worse condition than she remembered. The roof was full of holes and the walls looked like they could collapse at any time. But Oluchi was determined. She and Ada cleaned the small space, sweeping out dirt and debris. They patched the holes in the thatch roof as best as they could with palm leaves and other materials they found nearby. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. We will make it work, Oluchi told Ada with reassuring smile. We are strong and we will get through this together. Ada hugged her mother tightly. I believe you, Mama. While Oluchi and Ada tried to make the hut livable, Chief Okoro was plotting. He was furious that Oluchi had not been punished and was determined to make her suffer. His mind was filled with thoughts of revenge. I must bring her down. Maazi Okoro muttered to himself. My son's death will not go unpunished. Determined to get his way, Chief Okoro visited a native doctor, a man known for his powerful charms and dark magic. The native doctor's hut was filled with strange objects and a smoky haze from burning herbs. Maazi Okoro explained his desire to ruin Oluchi, and the native doctor listened carefully. You want to harm her? The native doctor asked, his eyes glinting with interest. Yes, Maazi Okoro replied. I want her to suffer. She must pay for what she has done. The native doctor nodded slowly. I can give you a charm that will bring her misery, but be warned, such magic comes at a cost. Maazi Okoro didn't hesitate. I don't care about the cost. Just give me the charm. The native doctor prepared a small dark object and handed it to Chief Okoro. Take this, he instructed. Bury it near her home, and her life will be filled with misfortune and sorrow. Chief Okoro took the charm, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Thank you, he said, already planning how to use it against Oluchi. Back at the old hut, Oluchi and Ada were trying to make the best of their situation. They were grateful to have a place to stay, even if it wasn't much. Oluchi knew she had to find a way to support them, so she began looking for work in the village. But with Chief Okoro's accusations hanging over her, it was difficult. The villagers were wary of her, and many refused to help her. One evening, as Oluchi and Ada sat in their small home, Ada looked up at her mother with wide eyes. Mama, will we ever be happy again? Oluchi hugged her daughter tightly. Yes, Ada, we will find happiness again. We just have to be strong and keep believing in ourselves. Maazi Okoro was determined to make Oluchi suffer. He wanted revenge for the death of his son, and he was willing to go to any length to achieve it. He had people keeping a close eye on Oluchi, so he knew exactly where she and Ada were living. One night, when the moon was high and the village was quiet, Maazi Okoro made his move. He carried the dark charm given to him by the native doctor and crept towards the old thatch hut where Oluchi and Ada were staying. His heart was filled with malice and anger. When he reached the hut, he carefully dug a small hole near the entrance and buried the charm. Muttering dark words under his breath, he covered the hole and smoothed the earth, making sure no one would see what he had done. Satisfied, he sneaked back to his house, feeling a cruel sense of satisfaction. This will teach her a lesson. He thought she would pay for what she did to my son. The next day, Maazi Okoro went to the village elders. He was still angry that Oluchi had not been punished and was determined to remind them that justice had not been served. My son still hasn't gotten the justice he deserves, Maazi Okoro told the elders, his voice filled with emotion. Oluchi must be made to answer for her actions. The elders listened carefully. They knew that the accusations against Oluchi were serious and they needed to find a way to resolve the matter. Maazi Obi, who was the wisest man among them, spoke up. We will invite Oluchi again and give her a chance to prove her innocence. If she is truly innocent, she will not fear taking an oath. The other elders nodded in agreement. They sent a messenger to call Oluchi to the village square one more time. When Oluchi and Ada arrived, the village square was filled with curious villagers. The tension was palpable and everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Maazi Obi stood and addressed Oluchi. Oluchi, you are accused of causing the deaths of your husband and son. To prove your innocence, you must swear an oath before the gods. Do you accept this challenge? Oluchi looked at Maazi Obi with calm determination. She knew she was innocent and had nothing to fear. I accept, she said firmly. I will swear the oath to prove my innocence. Ada held her mother's hand silently, trusting her completely. Oluchi's heart swelled with love and protectiveness for her daughter. Maazi Okoro watched from the crowd, a sinister smile on his face. He was confident that the charm he had buried would work against Oluchi, and he eagerly awaited the moment when she would be punished. The elders prepared the sacred items for the oath. They placed a calabash of water and a small statue of the village deity in front of Oluchi. Maazi Obi handed Oluchi a small piece of kola nut. You must chew this kola nut and swear that you did not cause the deaths of your husband and son. Maazi Obi instructed. If you are lying, The gods will punish you. Oluchi took the kola nut, her hand steady. She chewed it slowly, then swallowed. She raised her hand and spoke clearly. I swear before the gods and all the people of the village that I did not cause the deaths of my husband Medu or my son Afam. I am innocent. The villagers watched in silence, holding their breath. They knew that swearing a false oath could bring terrible consequences. Suddenly, a strong wind blew through the village square, and the trees rustled loudly. The villagers gasped, fearing that the gods were angry, but the wind quickly died down, and everything returned to normal. Maziobi nodded solemnly. The gods have heard your oath, Oluchi. If you are innocent, you have nothing to fear. Oluchi felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had spoken the truth, and she hoped that the gods would protect her. But she was unaware of the dark charm that Mazi Okoro, her father-in-law, had buried near her home, and the trouble it might bring. The villagers began to disperse, murmuring amongst themselves. Some believed Oluchi's innocence, while others were still suspicious. Mazi Okoro, however, was not satisfied. He returned home, plotting his next move. Oluchi and Ada went back to their small hut, grateful for the moment of peace. But the dark charm buried near their home began to take effect. Strange things started happening. Ada became ill, and their few belongings began to break or disappear. Oluchi's heart ached with worry, but she refused to give up. We will get through this, Ada, she told her daughter, holding her close. We are strong and we will find a way to overcome these hardships. But as days passed, the challenges grew harder, and Oluchi realized that she needed help. She had to uncover the truth about the strange events and find a way to protect herself and her daughter Ada from the dark forces working against them. Oluchi watched over Ada with worried eyes. Ada had become ill, and Oluchi knew she had to do something to save her daughter. She gathered some herbs she knew could help and prepared a special mixture. With gentle hands, she administered the herbs to Ada, praying for her recovery. I will not lose you like I lost her farm, Oluchi whispered to herself, determined to save her daughter. Days passed, and slowly Ada began to get better. Her strength returned, and her cheeks regained some color. Oluchi was relieved and grateful. She hugged her daughter tightly. Thank you, Mama, Ada said weakly. I feel better now. Oluchi smiled, though her heart was still heavy. She knew their struggles were far from over, but for now she was thankful that Ada, her daughter, was recovering. Weeks went by, and Ada grew stronger. She played around their small hut, her laughter bringing a glimmer of hope to Oluchi's heart. But just as things seemed to be looking up, Oluchi was struck down with a terrible illness. Painful sores appeared all over her body, and she was unable to move without agony. Mama, what is happening? Ada cried out, tears streaming down her face. She was so confused and didn't know how to help her mother. Oluchi winced in pain but tried to comfort her daughter. It's okay, Ada. I will be fine. We will get through this. Ada remembered the herbs her mother had used on her when she was sick. She thought maybe they could help her mother too. She ran to gather the herbs and prepared the mixture just as the mother had shown her. She gently applied the herbs to Oluchi's sores, but to her dismay, they didn't help. Oluchi's pains only seemed to worsen. Mama, why isn't it working? Ada sobbed. What can I do? Oluchi's heart broke at the sight of her daughter's distress. She wanted to reassure her, but the pain was too intense. She felt helpless and scared. knowing that there was no one to turn to for help. Ada, listen to me, Oluchi said weakly. You are strong, and we will get through this together. Just stay with me, and we'll find a way. Days turned into weeks, and Ada stayed by her mother's side, doing her best to care for her. But Oluchi's condition continued to worsen. The sores spread, and the pain became unbearable. Oluchi cried out in agony, and Ada felt her heart breaking. One day, as the sun set and cast a golden glow over the village, Ada made a decision. She knew she couldn't let her mother suffer alone. She had to find help, even if it meant facing the villagers who had turned their backs on them. Mama, I'm going to find help, Ada said firmly, wiping her tears. I will bring someone to help you. Oluchi nodded weakly, too tired to argue. She watched as her brave daughter ran out of the hut, her small figure determined and strong. As Ada ran through the village, knocking on doors and begging for help. But most of the villagers were afraid to get involved, fearing the wrath of Chief Okoro. Ada's plea fell on deaf ears, and she felt more desperate with each rejection. Please, someone help us, Ada cried, her voice breaking. Just as Ada was about to give up, she remembered Mrs. Ofo, the kind woman who had once offered them shelter. Ada ran to Mrs. Ofo's home, her heart pounding with hope. Mrs. Ofo, please help us, Ada begged, tears streaming down her face. My mother is very sick, and I don't know what to do. Mrs. Ofo looked at Ada with sympathy and concern. She knew how much Oluchi had suffered and couldn't turn away from a child in need. She gently took Ada's hand and led her back to the hut. When they arrived, Mrs. Ofo was shocked by Oluchi's condition. She quickly set to work, using her knowledge of herbs and remedies to try and ease Oluchi's pain. She stayed with them throughout the night, doing everything she could to help. Oluchi's pain began to lessen, and she managed a weak smile at Mrs. Ofo. Thank you, she whispered, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Mrs. Ofo nodded, her heart heavy with concern. We will take it one day at a time, Oluchi. You are not alone. Ada hugged her mother tightly, feeling a glimmer of hope once again, but they both knew that the road ahead would be challenging. Chief Okoro's dark magic and the villagers' suspicion still loomed over them. Oluchi and Ada would need all their strength and courage to face the battle ahead. Mr. Okoro was determined to see Oluchi suffer. When he heard about her worsening condition, he set off an alarm, eager to inform the village elders that the oath Oluchi had taken was now manifesting its effects. He went to the elders with urgency in his voice. The gods have shown their judgment, he declared. Oluchi is covered in sores, and her condition is dreadful. It is clear that her oath was false. The elders were troubled by this news. Maazi Obi, the wisest among them, decided that they needed to confirm Okoro's report. They gathered some of the village youths and headed towards Oluchi's hut. As they approached the old thatch hut, they could hear Ada's quiet sobs and Oluchi's faint groans of pain. The sight that greeted them was heart-wrenching. Oluchi lay weak and covered in sores, her body trembling with pain. Ada sat beside her, holding her mother's hands, her young face etched with worry and fear. Maazi Obi and the other elders stood in silence, taking in the pitiable condition of Oluchi. The youths who had accompanied them exchanged uneasy glances, feeling sorry for the suffering family. Maazi Obi, what should we do? One of the youths asked softly. Maazi Obi sighed deeply. We leave her to the gods. If this is their will, then we must let it be. Let the gods finish what they have started. Maazi Okoro was disappointed. He had hoped that the elders would banish Oluchi from the village, but now they were leaving her fate to the gods. He tried to hide his frustration and nodded in agreement. "As you wish, elders," Okoro said, masking his disappointment. "The gods will see justice done." The group left Oluchi's hut, leaving her and Ada alone once more. Mazi Okoro consoled himself with the thought that Oluchi would not survive what he had planted around the house. Even if she escaped banishment, she wouldn't escape the dark charm he had buried. She won't survive what awaits her. Okoro muttered to himself. My charm will ensure that. Back at the hut, Mrs. Ofo continued to care for Oluchi and Ada. She refused to abandon them, despite the villagers' growing suspicions and fear. She knew that Oluchi was a good woman who didn't deserve this suffering. "We will get through this," Mrs. Ofo said to Oluchi, her voice filled with determination. "I won't let you suffer alone." Ada clung to her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Mama, please get better. I need you." Oluchi managed a weak smile, her eyes filled with love for her daughter. "I will try, Ada. I will try." As the days passed, Oluchi's condition showed little improvement. The sores continued to cause her immense pain, and she grew weaker with each passing day. Mrs. Ofo did everything she could, but the dark charm's influence was strong. Mr. Okoro watched from a distance, satisfied with the suffering he had inflicted. He believed that his plan was working perfectly, but he never knew his cruel actions were sowing seeds of doubt and fear among the villagers. Some began to question the fairness of leaving Oluchi and Ada to suffer without help. One evening, as the sun set and cast a warm glow over the village, a small group of villagers gathered near the elders' meeting. They spoke in hushed tones, their faces filled with concern. "Maziobi, we cannot ignore what is happening to Oluchi," one of them said. "We must help her. It is not right to let her suffer like this." Maziobi listened carefully. He knew that the situation was complex and that they had to tread carefully, but he also felt a growing unease about Mazi Okoro's relentless pursuit of vengeance. "We will find a way to help Oluchi," Maziobi said finally, "but we must be cautious and respectful of the God's will." The villagers nodded in agreement, feeling a glimmer of hope. They knew that helping Oluchi would not be easy, but they were determined to do what was right. Meanwhile, Oluchi lay in her hut, her body weak, but her spirit unbroken. She held Ada's hand, drawing strength from her daughter's love. Despite the pain, she refused to give up. "We will get through this, Ada," Oluchi whispered. "We are strong and we will find a way." Days turned into weeks, and Oluchi continued to suffer from the terrible sores covering her body. The pain was unbearable, and she had felt weaker each day. Mrs. Ofo hadn't visited in a while, and Oluchi knew they needed help desperately. "Ada, my dear," Oluchi said weakly one morning, "we need to go to the road and ask for help from passerby. Maybe somebody will take pity on us." Ada nodded, her eyes filled with worry but also determination. "Yes, Mama, let's go." With great effort, Oluchi managed to get up, leaning heavily on Ada for support. They slowly made their way to the village road, hoping someone would stop and help them. As they walked, they saw a man approaching from a distance. When he got closer, Oluchi recognized him. It was Ejike, her husband's best friend. Ejike almost didn't recognize Oluchi because of her frail and sickly appearance. He stopped in his tracks, his eyes wide with shock and concern. "Oluchi, is that you?" Ejike asked, his voice full of surprise. Oluchi nodded weakly. "Yes, Ejike, it is me." Ejike walked up to her, his face filled with worry. What happened to you? Why do you look like this? Where have you been? It's a long story, Oluchi replied, her voice trembling. After Nedu's death, my in-laws threw me out. We've been struggling ever since then. Ejike's heart sank as he listened to Oluchi's story. He had heard about her in-laws' cruelty, but didn't know she was still in the village. I didn't know you were still here. I've been looking for you. Oluchi managed a weak smile. We've been hiding, trying to survive. Ejike looked at Ada, who was holding her mother's hand tightly. And who is this brave girl? He asked gently. This is my daughter Ada, Oluchi said, her voice filled with pride. Ejike knelt down to Ada's level and smiled at her. Hello Ada, you are very brave to take care of your mother like this. Ada nodded shyly, clinging to her mother's hand. Thank you, sir. Ejike stood up and looked at Oluchi. Where were you going? We were going to the road to ask for help. Oluchi replied, we don't have any food or money. Ejike's heart ached for them. Come with me. I'll take you back home and help you. He gently guided them back to their small hut. Once they were inside, Ejike reached into his pocket and pulled out some money. He handed it over to Oluchi. Here, take this, he said. It will help you buy some food and medicine. Oluchi's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Thank you, Ejike. You are very kind. Ejike smiled warmly. It's the least I could do. Nedu was my best friend, and I won't abandon his family. I promise to check on you regularly and help in any way I can. Ada hugged her mother tightly, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in a long while. Thank you, sir, she said softly. Ejike stayed with them for a while, listening to Oluchi's story and offering words of comfort. Before he left, he made sure they had everything they needed for the time being. Take care, Oluchi. I will be back soon, Ejike promised as he left. Oluchi watched him go, feeling a sense of relief and gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. She knew they still had a long way to go, but with Ejike's help, they had a chance to survive. Oluchi and Ada's spirits were lifted after Ejike's visit. The money he left allowed them to buy some food and medicine. Slowly, Oluchi's condition began to improve. Ada took on more responsibilities, fetching water and helping her mother as much as she could. One sunny afternoon, as Oluchi rested in the shade of their hut, Ada came running towards her face bright with excitement. Mama, Mama, look who is here, she shouted. Oluchi looked up and saw Ejike approaching, carrying a basket full of food and supplies. Her heart swelled with gratitude. Ejike, you came back, Oluchi said, her voice filled with relief. I promised I would, Ejike replied with a warm smile. He placed the basket on the ground and began unpacking its contents. Rice, beans, yam and some vegetables and a few basic medicines. I bought some more food and medicine. I also spoke to a doctor in the neighboring village. He has agreed to come and check on you, Ejike explained. Oluchi's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Ejike. I don't know how to repay you. You don't need to repay me. I'm just doing what Nedu have wanted, Ejike said softly. As they sat and talked, Ejike shared stories about Nedu, bringing smiles to Oluchi and Ada's faces. It was a bittersweet comfort, but it helped to keep Nedu's memory alive. Later that evening, the doctor Ejike had spoken about arrived. He examined Oluchi thoroughly, cleaned her sores, and gave her some more effective medicine. You need rest and proper nutrition, the doctor advised. With time, you will recover. Thank you, doctor, Oluchi said, feeling a glimmer of hope. Days turned into weeks, and with Ejike's continued support, Oluchi's health steadily improved. Ada was happier, seeing her mother regain her strength. However, Mazi Okoro had not given up on his plans. He learned about Ejike's involvement and grew furious. How dare he interfere? Okoro fumed. I will not let him ruin my plans. Okoro decided to take drastic measures. He went back to the elders, insisting that Oluchi needed to be banished immediately. He painted Ejike's help as an act of rebellion against the village's customs. The gods are angry of her presence, Okoro claimed. We must act now before it is too late. The elders were torn. Mazi Obi, who had always been cautious, felt a deep unease about Okoro's relentless pursuit of Oluchi. He decided to speak privately with Ejike to understand the situation better. Mazi Obi, Ejike greeted respectfully. I know why you are here. Ejike, tell me, why are you helping Oluchi? Mazi Obi asked. I am helping her because she is innocent. Ejike replied firmly. Nedu was my best friend, and I cannot stand by and watch his family suffer unjustly. Mazi Obi nodded, sensing the sincerity in Ejike's words. I have always doubted Okoro's intentions. His hatred is consuming him. Oluchi deserves a chance to live peacefully. Ejike said, I beg you, Mazi Obi, help her. Mazi Obi pondered deeply. He decided to confront Okoro directly. Okoro, Mazi Obi said sternly, your actions are driven by vengeance, not justice. The gods do not demand such cruelty. You dare question me? Okoro spat. The gods have spoken. No, Okoro, it is your hatred speaking. Mazi Obi retorted. We will not punish Oluchi. Instead, we will seek the truth. The village elders, led by Mazi Obi, decided to reinvestigate the circumstances of Nedu's death and Oluchi's suffering. They wanted to ensure that justice, not vengeance, prevailed. In the meantime, Ejike continued to support Oluchi and Ada, determined to see them through this ordeal. Oluchi, now more hopeful than ever, prayed that the truth would finally come to light. The sun was shining brightly as Ada walked in their small compound, weeding the grass that had grown tall around their huts. The grass had become a problem, covering the area and making it difficult for them to move around freely. As Ada walked by the side of the hut, her hoe suddenly struck something hard. Curious, she knelt down and began to dig with her hands. Brushing away the soil, her eyes widened as she uncovered a black object tied with red pieces of cloth. Her heart pondered as she saw the name Oluchi written on it. Mama, Mama, Ada shouted, her voice filled with fear and urgency. Oluchi, who had been resting inside, heard her daughter's cries and struggled to her feet despite her weakness. She hurried outside to see what had happened. Ada, what is wrong? Oluchi asked, her voice trembling. Mama, look at this. Ada pointed to the strange object she had unearthed. Oluchi's eyes widened in horror as she saw what Ada was holding. The sight of the black object, tied with red pieces of cloth and bearing her name, made her feel faint. She staggered backward, her hand clutching her chest. Who could have done this? Oluchi cried out, feeling a wave of helplessness wash over her. Ada, still holding the object, looked at her mother with wide, fearful eyes. Mama, what is it? What does it mean? Oluchi took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. It's a charm, Ada. Someone buried it here to bring us harm. But why, Mama? Why would someone do this to us? Ada asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, my dear, Oluchi replied, tears streaming down her face. But we must get rid of it. Oluchi took the object from Ada and placed it on the ground. She felt a surge of determination. She wouldn't let this curse defeat her. She had to find a way to protect her daughter and herself. We need to find someone who can help us, Oluchi said. Someone who knows about these things. But who, Mama? Who will help us? Ada asked, her eyes filled with worry. Ejike, Oluchi said firmly. He has been a good friend to us. Maybe he knows someone who can help us. Later that day, Oluchi and Ada set out to find Ejike. They walked slowly, Oluchi still weak but determined. When they reached Ejike's house, he welcomed them warmly. Oluchi, Ada, come in, Ejike said. What brings you here? Oluchi explained everything to Ejike, showing him the cursed object Ada had found. Ejike's face grew serious as he examined it. This is very troubling, Ejike said. But I know someone who might be able to help. There is an old woman in the neighboring village. She knows about these things. We can go to her. Oluchi nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. Thank you, Ejike. I don't know what I would have done without you. Ejike smiled gently. Let's go now. The sooner we get rid of this, the better. They set off to the neighboring village, walking as quickly as Oluchi's condition allowed. When they arrived, Ejike led them to a small hut at the edge of the village. An elderly woman with kind eyes and a wise demeanor greeted them. Welcome, she said. How can I help you? Ejike explained their situation, showing her the cursed object. The old woman nodded thoughtfully. This is indeed a powerful curse, she said, but don't worry, we can remove it. The old woman performed a ritual to cleanse the curse, burning the object and chanting prayers. Oluchi and Ada watched with bated breath, praying that this would finally bring them some peace. When the ritual was completed, the old woman smiled at them. The curse is lifted. You are safe now. Oluchi felt a wave of relief wash over her. Thank you, she said, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Take care of each other, the old woman said, and remember, love and kindness will always overcome hatred and evil. Back in the village, Maazokoro was starting to feel the effect of his own evil actions. He had planted a charm to harm Oluchi, but the curse began to backfire on him. He started experiencing strange pains and nightmares that kept him awake at night. His health began to deteriorate rapidly, and his mind was filled with guilt and fear. One day, as he sat alone in his compound, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He knew that the curse he had intended for Oluchi was now affecting him. Desperation and fear gripped him as he realized the gravity of his actions. Maazokoro decided that he couldn't keep the truth hidden any longer. He knew he had to confess to the elders and seek forgiveness. His hatred for Oluchi had driven him to do terrible things, and now he was paying for the price. With a heavy heart, Maazokoro went to the village square where the elders often gathered. He could barely walk due to his condition, but he forced himself to move forward. When he reached the elders, they looked at him with concern, seeing the change in his appearance. Elders, I have something to confess, Maazokoro began, his voice trembling. I have wronged Oluchi in the most terrible way. I planted a charm to harm her because of my hatred. I blamed her for my son's death, but Nedu died a natural death. The elders were shocked by his confession. They had suspected something was wrong, but hearing it directly from Maazokoro was startling. They gathered around him, their faces a mixture of anger and disappointment. Why did you do this, Okoro? One of the elders asked. Why did you let your hatred consume you? Maazokoro bowed his head, tears streaming down his face. I was blinded by my anger and grief. I couldn't accept that my son was gone. I wanted someone to blame, and Oluchi was an easy target. But now, I see the error on my ways. The curse had backfired on me, and I am suffering. One of the elders, an old man with a kind face, spoke up. Okoro, your actions have caused you great harm to Oluchi and her daughter. You must seek for forgiveness and make amends for what you have done. Mazokoro nodded, his body shaking with sobs. I will. I will do whatever it takes to make things right. The elders decided to summon Oluchi to the village square. When she arrived with her daughter Ada, they saw the pain and suffering that she had endured. Her face was pale and she looked weak, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Oluchi, the old man said gently, Mazi Okoro has confessed to his wrongdoings. He has admitted to planting the charm and falsely accusing you. He seeks your forgiveness. Oluchi looked at Mazi Okoro, who was now kneeling before her, his eyes filled with regret. She felt mix of emotions, anger, sorrow, and relief. But deep down, she knew that holding on to hatred would only bring more pain. Mr. Okoro, Oluchi began, her voice steady but soft. You have caused me and my daughter so much suffering, but I cannot carry this burden of hatred any longer. I forgive you, not because of what you did was right, but because I want to move forward and find peace. Mr. Okoro sobbed uncontrollably, grateful for her forgiveness. Thank you, Oluchi. I will do everything in my power to help you and Ada from now on. I promise to make amends for my actions. Oluchi shook her head gently. Mr. Okoro, I do not need anything from you. My forgiveness is enough. Use this chance to change and become a better person. The elders nodded in approval, seeing the beginning of a new chapter for both Oluchi and Mr. Okoro. They knew that forgiveness was the first step towards healing and rebuilding trust in the community. However, the elders also decided that Mr. Okoro must be banished from the village for his atrocities. Okoro, your actions have caused great harm. As a consequence, you will be banished from this village, the old man announced solemnly. Mr. Okoro accepted his fate with a bowed head. The next day, the village gathered to witness Okoro's departure. He packed his belongings and, with a heavy heart, walked out of the village he had called home. The villagers watched him in silence, understanding the seriousness of his punishment. Slowly, the villagers began to see Oluchi in a new light. They realized that she was not the cause of their misfortunes, but a victim of unjust hatred. They started to offer their support and kindness, helping her rebuild her life. Oluchi felt a sense of relief and gratitude. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but she was no longer alone. With Ada by her side and the support of the villagers, she felt hopeful for the first time in a long while. One evening, as Oluchi and Ada sat outside their hut, they watched the sunset together. Ada looked at her mother with admiration and love. Mama, you are the strongest person I know. Oluchi smiled and hugged her daughter tightly. Thank you, Ada. We have been through so much, but we have each other. And with love and kindness, we can overcome anything. After Mazi Okoro's departure, the village elders knew there was still more to be done to mend the broken relationships and heal the wounds inflicted by the unjust treatment of Oluchi and her daughter Ada. The elders decided to call a meeting in the village square to address the entire community. The next morning, the elders sent messages to every corner of the village, inviting all the villagers to the market square. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, people began to gather, curious and anxious about the reason for the meeting. When the square was filled, one of the elders, the old man with a kind face, stood up and addressed the crowd. My fellow villagers, we have gathered here today to right a wrong that has been done to one of our own. Oluchi and her daughter Ada have suffered greatly because of false accusation and the hatred of one man. But we must remember that we all share in the blame for how we treated them. There was a murmur of agreement and guilt among the villagers as they realized the truth of the elders' words. The elder continued, Mazi Okoro has confessed his sins and has been banished from our village. However, the pain and suffering that Oluchi and Ada endured cannot be erased so easily. We must come together to seek their forgiveness and to make amends. Oluchi, standing beside Ada, felt a wave of emotions wash over her as she listened to the elder. She could see the remorse in the faces of the villagers who had once scorned her. One by one, the villagers stepped forward, each asking for Oluchi's forgiveness. Tears streamed down their faces as they expressed their gratitude for believing the lies and for treating her and her daughter so harshly. Oluchi's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and compassion. She forgave each villager, knowing that this was the beginning of true healing. After everyone had spoken, the elder raised his hand for silence. We must do more than just apologize. We must show our support and appreciation for Oluchi and Ada. Let us come together to provide for them as they rebuild their lives. The villagers responded with enthusiasm and generosity. They contributed large sums of money each, giving what they could to help Oluchi. The elders organized the construction of a new house on Oluchi's father's land, ensuring it was a beautiful and sturdy home where she and Ada could live comfortably. As the days turned into weeks, the villagers worked tirelessly to build the new house. It was a grand and joyful project, symbolizing the community's collective effort to make amends when the house was finally completed. It stood as a testament to the power of forgiveness and unity. Oluchi's gratitude knew no bounds. She thanked the villagers with heartfelt words, and the community felt a deep sense of fulfillment and joy in having made things right. With the money that was collected, Oluchi started a large fabric business in the village market. Her shop quickly became popular, known for its beautiful fabrics and Oluchi's warm, friendly service. Her business flourished, bringing prosperity not only to her and Ada but also to the entire village. As people came from neighboring communities to buy her fabrics, Oluchi and Ada's life transformed dramatically. They no longer lived in fear or isolation. The new house became a home filled with laughter, love, and hope. Ada grew into a confident and happy young woman, proud of her mother's strength and resilience. One evening, as the sun set and cast a glow over the village, Oluchi and Ada sat outside their beautiful new home. They watched the bustling market where Oluchi's fabric shop stood as a beacon of their hard work and perseverance. Mama, our lives has changed so much, Ada said, her eyes shining with happiness. Oluchi smiled, hugging her daughter close. Yes, Ada, it has. We have been through so many things, but we have come out stronger and happier. With the support of our community, we have built a new life filled with hope and love. The villagers continued to support Oluchi's business, and her reputation as a skilled and kind businesswoman spread far and wide. Oluchi and Ada lived happily, surrounded by a community that had learned the value of forgiveness, kindness, and unity. Their story became a symbol of hope and resilience, inspiring others to seek forgiveness and make amends for past wrongs. And so, Oluchi and Ada lived happily ever after, and their future bright with endless possibilities. The most important lesson in this story is about how strong people can be even when things are very hard. Oluchi lost her husband and son, and her in-laws treated her badly. Her community ignored her, but she still wanted to take care of her daughter. She was brave and stood up against unfair treatment, even when people blamed her for things she didn't do and left her alone. This shows that staying hopeful and strong is very important. Oluchi's story teaches us to be kind, honest, and to always fight for our dignity and the well-being of our loved ones, no matter what happens. And with that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonders, and endless possibilities. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.